if you look in the folders that everyone received, you'll see two reports which were produced by Arise, one on innovation for good in Israel, and one on corporate social responsibility. We're asked many places around the world, is Israel a socially responsible investment destination? And we don't just want to shoot from the hip and say, yes, of course it is, it's a wonderful country, etc. We actually have done a deep dive and gathered a lot of empiric information to show, according to the accepted grid of corporate social responsibility used by the major banks and financial institutions around the world, that Israel is an extremely safe destination for socially for investment. We received a major endorsement this year by BDO, which is one of the world's largest accounting firms. And it's my pleasure and honor to introduce Chen from BDO, who's a partner in BDO, Chen Herzog. He's a senior partner, and he's just going to come and give us a little bit of an overview of corporate social responsibility in Israel, what it looks like, and but I encourage you all to please take these reports home. You know, if you've created business contacts in our B2B business matchmaking sessions, and you go back to your country, wherever it is, whether it's in Sweden and India. Somebody says, why are you doing business in Israel? I've heard that companies in Israel are abusing human rights and so on and so forth. These reports that we've given you are the best answer to that, and you can show them from a very objective, empiric perspective that is inaccurate. So I'm not going to steal Chen's show. Chen, we just want to welcome you. Let's give a warm welcome to Chen Herzog, senior partner of BDO accounting firm, please.
Hi, so I want to give you our view of the economic environment in Israel and how social and environmental aspects fit in. And if we're talking about the Israeli economy, in terms of economic terms, we are on average relative to OECD countries in terms of standard of living. We have a very stable fiscal regime, even despite the recent political instability. We have a manageable government deficit. And I think if you're looking at what makes the startup nation shine, what is the comparative advantage of Israel, I think you can see a few indicators that lead to that comparative advantage. One of that is our investment in research and development. The R&D investment in Israel is among the highest in the OECD countries. We have a very high percentage of university education. We have a good health system which translates to long life expectancy and low unemployment rates. All of these are our strengths in terms of our economic environment. We have also a few challenges, and part of the challenge of creating social and environmentally business development in Israel is dealing with these challenges. Our economic challenges include high level of defense expenditure. We have relatively high inequality, and we are dealing with high population density, which creates environmental burden. So the challenge is, looking forward, how do we take advantage of our relative advantages while diminishing and tackling our challenges? And traditionally, the startup nation, startup nation is really an example where we took a challenge and created it into opportunity. Because Israel, if you look at Israel R&D, Israel startups, many of them originated from defense expenditure spillovers. Our cyber technology is a spillover from defense-related cyber investment. So we managed to take an obstacle, a challenge, and create it to an opportunity. And today, Israel is has among the highest national expenditure on R&D among OECD countries, which gives the relative advantage for our high-tech sector. And translate to high the VC investment in Israel are the highest per capita. And traditionally, we said that Israel had the brain, but we didn't have the cash. We didn't have any natural resources. We did have the Dead Sea. That's our traditionally was our only natural resources, which we used to produce potash, bromine, and in recent years we have two additional energy-related natural resources. One is the sun. As you may have noticed, it is December now. This is how December looks in Israel. You can imagine how the sun is shining if you come here in July and August. We have the highest effective sun hours in Europe, which translates to a relative advantage for solar-based energy. And if you look at sunroofs around Israel, you can see almost every house in Israel is generating their own home heating, water heating, using solar energy. We have PV panels in the south of Israel creating solar electricity, and this translates to an increasing comparative advantage. But not only solar energy, we also have, in the last decade, discovered very significant gas reserves, offshore deep water gas reserves, which create a new relative advantage. And you know, in absolute terms, Israel is no gas empire. We don't have the resources, not of the US, not of Saudi Arabia. But in relative terms, relative to the size of the economy, if you take the total gas reserves per capita, we are actually ranked number 4 in the OECD. We have twice more gas reserves per capita than the US, which gives us a new comparative advantage which we didn't have before for energy-intensive applications. This allowed us, now coming to the environmental aspect, this allowed us to substantially reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And the greenhouse gas emissions reduction was due to the utilization of those gas resources, replacement of coal to gas, and actually just last month, Israel has committed to completely phase out coal-based generation within 5 years, which will further reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, which means that any energy-intensive investment in Israel is really also environmentally friendly. How do we incorporate all those environmental, social, and aspects into corporate decisions? And you know, traditionally, when we work with firms, it was very clear that a firm, any enterprise has only one goal: to maximize the profits for its shareholders. And yes, this is the basis of modern economy, to maximize profits. But today, in Israel and elsewhere, more and more companies are understanding that the way to maximize profits is not only to maximize profits for the shareholders, but for all stakeholders, for the customers, for the employees, for the taxpayers, for the suppliers, and you have to take into account doing well, not only for the shareholders, but for their entire economy. And one of the ways to do that is to take into account the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, which more and more firms are now taking into account when they are designing their corporate strategy. And if we're looking at the evolution of social and environmental consideration in business activities, not in NGOs, within the business community, we see 3 stages. The first stage was philanthropy. And you know, philanthropy is also part of the Jewish tradition of donation, of giving back part of your revenues or proceedings back to the community. And this has been always part of the business sector and has grown over the year. The second phase was corporate responsibility, CSR reporting, where companies say it's not enough to give back, it's not enough to donate. You also have to be transparent about your business environment, about your environmental footprint, about your effect on the entire stakeholders. And more companies in Israel today, about half of the large publicly traded companies listed in Israel, in the Israeli Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, report CSR indicators. And we are working with many of these companies about social responsibility reporting, which means be transparent to your stakeholders about not only about your profits, but also about your environmental footprint, about your social aspects. And today, more and more companies are reporting ESG reporting. But that's not enough. You're transparent, but you know every company in Israel and elsewhere publishes an annual report. An annual report, your balance sheet to the shareholders. What is a balance sheet? What is a P&L report? You report what was the profit to the shareholders. And now, more and more companies understand that it's not enough to report what was the profit to the shareholders. You have to give the bottom line to the entire stakeholders. And this is what we call impact reporting. And impact reporting is assessing or evaluating, giving the bottom line of the company's effect of its entire shareholders. And it includes three major aspects. One is the economic point. An economic impact is not only how much profit you made for the shareholders, how much profit or how much value added you created for your entire stakeholders, for the shareholders, for the employees, for the your tax payments, your payments to local suppliers, and incorporating all these aspects really mean how did the enterprise contribute to growing the national pie, to increasing the GDP. We all want growth. How did each company contribute to creating growth? And that's one aspect. But it's not enough to create growth. It's not enough to create income. The second question is, how is this income distributed? Is your enterprise, is your company contributing to more fair distribution of wealth? How is the pie, the national pie, divided more equally? And this is the second aspect that impact reporting measures. How did your company, how did this firm contribute to more fair division of the national pie? The third aspect is the environmental aspect, because we want growth, we want more fair distribution of wealth, but we also want to do that without creating an environmental footprint. And there is many times a tension between those different goals, and what impact reporting allows us, it allows us to measure each and every of these aspects. Why is it important? It's important for the dialogue with stakeholders. It's important for the social license to operate. It's important for the dialogue with the regulatory authorities. It's important for dealing with the government regarding tax incentives or tax breaks that take into account those contributions. And it's important with the dialogue with the entire public. Many global companies today publish impact reports. Google, Microsoft, Apple, Bank of America, all these companies publish annual impact report, assessing not only their profits, but their contribution in terms of economic, social, and environmental aspects. And even in Israel, we see more and more companies that are assessing and publishing our impact reports. We are working with many of these companies in Israel. I'll present two short test cases or benchmark cases to show you some of our work we've done with Israeli companies evaluating their impact assessments. The first case study I want to present is with a project we did with Bank Hapoalim. Bank Hapoalim is Israel's largest commercial bank, merchant bank. And we just, this year, it was the first financial institution in Israel to publish an impact report. And I think the results overwhelmed even the bank itself. This single bank contributes 1.5% of Israel's GDP. Its induced impact of Israel, its induced contribution to Israel GDP is 19.5 billion shekels. It directly employs only about 10,000 employees, but its overall effect on employment in Israel, 51,000 jobs created through employment of suppliers and sub-suppliers. We also evaluated its contribution to tax payments. Almost 1% of Israel's national tax revenue came from this bank alone. So the bank has 9,000 direct employees, employs additional 20,000 employees through its supplier chain, and its overall contribution to employment in Israel, about 50,000 jobs. we also evaluate its environmental impact, because one of the policies of the bank is to evaluate and to give credit for environmental investments. We talked earlier about the gas project, about the solar panel revolution. This could not come true or could not be fulfilled if we didn't have financial institutions supporting and giving credit to those environmental friendly investments. So that's one example of an impact study evaluating the economic impact of a bank. Now I want to give you a second example, extremely different, but very similar. And this time, we're talking about an NGO. Leket Israel is Israel's food bank. It's a non-profit organization that takes surplus food from the farmers, from hotels, from venues like this one, and provide it to the needy, to the poor. It's Israel's largest food bank. And the impact study we did for them, we actually evaluated, and they're doing good. But how do you quantify that? How do you measure the economic impact? And basically, we identified three main impact aspects here. One is economic benefit. Basically, what this NGO, what this food bank is doing, it's taking waste, which otherwise would be an economic burden, and it's transferring it to an asset. So it's growing the pie, it's creating more value by reducing waste and making it or providing it to the needy. The second is a social benefit, because we have a problem. We began our discussion this afternoon talking about our inequality problem, and we don't have any problem in Israel of starving population, but we do have a problem of food insecurity. And part of Leket's contribution is by providing more food to those with food insecurity, thus reducing inequality and increasing a more fair distribution of wealth. And the third aspect is the environmental aspect, because food that is thrown away creates environmental footprint. It has to be disposed of, it creates greenhouse gas emissions, it takes the entire production of food, and the agriculture takes out land resources, which are scarce resources in Israel, takes water. So if you prevent food loss, you're actually reducing the environmental impact. And what we found out that food rescue actually entails a yield, an economic yield of almost 4. Every dollar invested in food rescue creates $3.6 of value for the needy in terms of the value of food created. If you take into account the environmental impact, you double that value to $7 for each dollar investment. So this is really a very important aspect or contribution. Actually, we took this research to the Israeli government. And this was one of the facilitators that assisted us, or assisted Leket last year, to pass in the Israeli parliament a law, an act, a Food Rescue Act, which is the equivalent of the US Good Samaritan law. Basically, it provides legal protection to those who donate food in good wealth, in good faith, so that they cannot be sued if along the way someone is hurt or injured from using this food. So we have a food, in Israel, food rescue is important more than any other country, because not only do we have food insecurity amongst some of the sectors, we have relatively high cost of food here. I don't know if you noticed, but food expenditure in Israel is relatively high part of the family expenditure, so that providing food rescue creates social benefit more than many other countries in the world. So just to sum up, we believe that impact creates impacts. Measuring impact, understanding your impact allows you not only to manage your companies or your enterprise more precisely or more efficiently, but also to deal with the various stakeholders, with the government, with your customers, with the press, creating impact, doing well by doing good. Thank you.